It's the greatest mystery in literary history. A divisive question with highly contested answers. Who was the writer behind the pen name William Shakespeare? Welcome to Don't Quill the Messenger. Here's your host, Stephen Sable.
Welcome back, fellow Quillers. We're so glad to have you here. Thank you for joining us. You know, I sometimes forget to say thank you to all of you in the Quiller Nation for spending every fortnight here with me. And I appreciate you all so much, and so glad that you choose Don't Quill the Messenger as one of your entertainment options with all of the noise that is out there. Today, I want to talk about a new entertainment option I think you're all going to enjoy, and it involves my guest for this episode. His name is George Brown, and he is the producer, founder, principal actor, performer,
chief cook and bottle washer,
probably toilet cleaner for Travels with Willie. George, welcome to Don't Quill the Messenger.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here, Stephen.
So you decided after a long career in education to sell off everything you own, pack it all into an RV, and travel the country chasing Shakespeare. Is that basically what it is?
That's exactly right. So after about 42 years in higher education as a theater educator, my training came out as a director, undergraduate school in New Jersey at Glassboro State, went to Penn State, got my MFA in directing, and started working in the professional theater around the country. And then after a few years as the artistic director of a theater in the Virgin Islands, Island Center for the Performing Arts.
That sounds like a dream job.
It was.
Where do I sign up for that?
I was scuba diving every weekend.
Oh, wow.
Doing theater at night and scuba diving during the day. But after that, I got into higher education and became a faculty member where I taught directing, directed Shakespeare throughout higher education, worked with professional theater companies like the Kentucky Shakespeare Festival, became the chair of the theater program at Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois, associate dean, so I kept growing up in responsibilities. And then I became the dean of the Belcher College of Fine and Performing Arts at Western Carolina University, and I was there for a decade. Then I retired, and like you said, we sold everything and we're on the road.
Well, that's quite a string of illustrious positions that you've held there. And I can't imagine, I know my own background and the number of productions that I've been involved with, but I can't imagine the number of shows you must have either produced, directed, or did you also perform on the stage?
Some. Matter of fact, the last performances I did, I played Falstaff in...
that doesn't surprise me.
Falstaff in Henry IV Part 1 and 2, back-to-back in rotating rep at Montford Park Players in Asheville.
Oh, wow.
But most of my career has been spent as a director, as a fight choreographer. I was a member of the Society of American Fight Directors. So I did a lot of fights. I can't tell you how many times I've done Romeo and Juliet to begin with. And then about 130, 140 productions directing, and of that, probably about 60 have been Shakespeare.
So do you still brandish a blade now and then? Or?
I did. As a matter of fact, when in Henry IV Part 2, I had to beat pistol.
Yeah,
so
sure,
yes.
Sure. You know, I always find, this is sort of a tangent, but because you brought it up, I always find that as a director, I am hesitant to use rehearsal time on choreography because we need so much of that time on, the character development and getting the text down and making sure the layers are there. And then the choreography tends to sort of get pushed aside until the very last minute, which is totally dangerous and terrible idea, but it just happens that way no matter what. And then you find yourself constrained. You have these grandiose ideas about how elaborate you want this sword contest to be between these characters. And ultimately you're like, okay, 4, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you attack 4, 3, 2, 5. That's interesting. And now thrust dead. And it's over, right?
Exactly. But you can also create patterns that you can just turn on stage and repeat, and it looks totally different.
Right.
So you can use an inexperienced actor, teach them a very simple pattern that looks complex, and then rotate it around the stage a couple of times, and it works beautifully.
Well, and I always feel like, the Hollywood versions of stage combat, of sword combat,
Patty Creen's work, yes,
are always beautiful and fun to watch, but not realistic because, most sword duels were over pretty fast anyway, right? So,
and mostly like between Mercutio and Tybalt and Romeo interfering, and somebody gets stabbed under the arm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very interesting. So tell me about what inspires someone like yourself to go, I'm going to start a YouTube series. And did your wife think you were insane when you were like, you know what I'm going to do, honey? I'm going to start a YouTube series. We're going to travel the nation, chasing Shakespeare productions and interviewing people about what it is that they find so still intriguing about the works of the Bard.
My wife always thinks I'm crazy.
Oh, well,
so that to begin with.
That's probably all of us.
Yes. Actually, no, she's on board. She's loving the travel. This is in our travel plans. I'm looking at all the Shakespeare, but we're also visiting all the national parks. We're looking at all the beautiful places across America. We're enjoying our retirement as much as we possibly can. And so the travels bring me in contact with great people, old friends. I had the chance to interview my mentor, Bob Leonard, who lives just down the coast in California. And we got to talk for about 25, 30 minutes. And I hadn't talked to him in about 25 years. Wow. And so this trip has given us many, many joys. The chance to sit and enjoy the beautiful countryside, to meet great people, and then, of course, to do the Shakespeare work. The idea for this started back in 2008 when I was at Bradley University. I was eligible for a sabbatical, and I was trying to think out what would be fun to do for a year. And the idea was to jump in an RV and just travel around the country, Shakespeare Festival to Shakespeare Festival, see if I could see at least one Shakespeare production in every state, and during that, see the entire canon, and then write a book about it called Travels with Willie. But we all know what happened in 2008. The market dropped out of the bottom, and there was a great danger of in higher education, specifically about programs being cut. And so as the chair of the theater program, I canceled my sabbatical so that I could be there to make sure my program stayed intact. And so because I was...
Well, I mean, that makes total sense, yeah. But what an unfortunate sacrifice to have to make, but that does make total sense, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you're not there, then that makes it real, out of sight, out of mind, right? That made it real easy then for them to be like, forget it, bye. See you.
And we know that theater programs are very expensive. Live theater costs money to put together. And so we're always grateful to our sponsors and our supporters that help us to keep the shows on the board. But ultimately, it's the personality, the presence of personality that helps to influence people. And I think that comes out of our knowledge of how theater works too. And so I put that idea just in my back pocket. And as we started to near retirement, I was really worried about what the heck I was going to do. I was thinking about getting back on stage. I jumped in with a theater company, like I shared with you, and played Falstaff at Montford Park Players just to get back on the boards. I contacted friends at...
No, wait a minute. That's not just to get back on the boards. Falstaff in Henry for parts 1 and 2. I mean, come on. That's giant.
And co-directed it at the same time.
Those combined, if you combine those, that's got to be up in like the top 5 as far as line load.
But it's also a bucket list thing, right? It's one of those roles that you want to play. And so,
did you have to pad yourself? Because you're not a very big guy.
I've lost 50 pounds since we hit the road.
Oh, that's why.
I was 300 pounds when I played the role.
You say you're not big enough for Falstaff.
So when it came time to retire, my wife said, "So what are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I have this idea. Why don't we try this?" And so we had been RVing previously, but not full timing. We just, we'd go off to Savannah from North Carolina, or we'd go over to the beaches at the Outer Banks and things like that. And so we decided we were going to sell our property, sell our home, put all that money into a CD account and just let it sit there, move into our RV and start traveling. And everywhere I've gone, I found a Shakespeare festival. I saw The Tempest in Louisiana, saw Coriolanus in Albuquerque, New Mexico, saw a marvelous puppet production of Romeo and Juliet at the St. Louis Zoo put on by the St. Louis Shakespeare Festival. Cymbeline, which is a play I'd never seen before at the Kentucky Shakespeare Festival because I went back to go see friends. I saw a marvelous Richard III down in Los Angeles at a company down there. So everywhere I've gone.
How was the Imogen in Cymbeline? That's like the third largest female role in the Shakespeare canon. How was she? She's got to carry that play.
She did, and again, outdoor theater, thousands of people in the audience on a Friday night, and everybody was just attached to the production. So
that's great.
Yeah,
that's a hard show to do.
It is, and it's like, again, I saw a King John in with Sweet Tea Shakespeare in Fayetteville, North Carolina, in probably not bigger than your living room here. The theater was very compact. So I've seen them in large theaters. I've seen it in the most intimate spaces. And I've had the wonderful chance to talk to the artists about their work in Shakespeare and why they think what were their first experiences and why do they think Shakespeare still matters today.
So how many episodes do you think you have already in the can? Like if my listeners go look for it, about how many episodes?
Right now I've got about 5 or 6 interviews done. I've got another 5 or 6 that I'm editing right now. But in addition to that, I've also looked for Shakespeare in society, right? Shakespeare just at large. In Los Angeles, there's a Shakespeare Bridge. So I did a video about going over the Shakespeare Bridge. Went over to in San Francisco, went to the Shakespeare Gardens and spent a little time in
the Huntington and outside of Pasadena, they have a Shakespeare garden too.
Exactly.
It's really extensive one too. Yeah. It's really nice.
I didn't get a chance to get there because we had to rearrange our travels, but I'll get back to it. But in Oxford, Mississippi, at Old Miss University, in their library, they have a copy of the first folio. It just so happens that first folio was owned by Edwin Booth. And so
no kidding.
They were going to let me come into the library. They were going to show me it and show me all the documentation around it and look to see if there was any marginalia that was written.
Sure.
So that's also what I'm looking for is what are those
So
unique
was there?
things?
Did Booth have any notes in it?
I'm going back to Mississippi to see that. I haven't been there yet.
Oh, you'll have to let me know about that.
Yeah.
Because, actors notoriously write notes in their scripts.
Exactly.
And, talking about one of the most unfortunate life circumstances. Edwin Booth was one of the finest actors of the American stage, and forever will be tainted with the whole conspiracy thing and the Lincoln assassination. But wow.
And so I'm finding Shakespeare everywhere I go. There's a little town in southwest New Mexico called Shakespeare, and if you read about Wyatt Earp, all the cowboy gang that he fought against, they used to hang out in Shakespeare. And so we're heading back to Shakespeare after we come back through California. We're heading over to stop in Shakespeare to visit Shakespeare.
I'm going to put that on my list of places I need to visit because that's just obviously a must do. So, well, that's really fascinating. So the next question I want to ask you is, in all these travels and all these productions, is there sort of a common strain or a common theme you're noticing with these modern Shakespeare producing organizations that you see that sort of runs through what they're choosing to do and how they're choosing to present the productions to the audience? Or is it really just mix match and unique all around?
There's a significant level of uniqueness that goes across these theaters because they know their communities. And Sweet Tea Shakespeare Company in Fayetteville, North Carolina, is very dedicated, much like you are, to growing its own company. And so they're looking for pieces that challenge themselves, where The Noise Within in Los Angeles is a big theater company. They have a standard rep company that they're doing, and their productions are looking for the broadest audience appeal possible. And so each theater company, I think, brings their own unique twist to it. I'm looking forward to getting over to Ashland. I'm looking forward to coming back and seeing your productions here and to see how the community resonates with all those theaters. Mm-hmm. Each audience is a little bit different, and you can see in the theaters how they talk to their audiences and create community. And I think that's one of the most important things about it.
Some of the organizations, because, obviously having a Shakespeare company, I keep track of what a lot of the other organizations are doing. And it has been discouraging to me to see that some of the Shakespeare festivals that are out there are only doing maybe one Shakespeare play a year. And I don't know how you can still call yourself a Shakespeare festival if you're doing only one play. We don't even call ourselves a festival, right? We're just a Shakespeare company. But we're doing 2 shows in repertory, and some of these places, like just recently I was researching what Montgomery is doing in Alabama.
1 show a year.
1 Shakespeare play a year.
Yeah.
Up in Utah, they're starting to reduce their numbers. Over here in Ashland, it was down to 2. Now they're back to 3, but there's always 1 out of the 3 that's sort of this experimental. Like it's called a Shakespeare play, but it's really some other animal that they're doing there. And I find it sort of saddening that these, preeminent Shakespeare festivals really aren't a festival of plays committed to the writer anymore.
No, and there's also been a significant number of Shakespeare companies that have closed across the United States and are no longer in existence. As I started to plan this adventure across the country, I created a database that has about 130 different Shakespeare festivals. And I started creating that database about 2 years before we left. And we've been on the road coming up on our first year anniversary. I can't tell you, but a dozen or more of them have already closed. And part of this is still a reaction to COVID, that audiences haven't come back. Movie theaters are having problems getting audiences to come back, because everything's now streamed, everything's available, and you can have it right on your home TV. So that's why I think reaching out to community and building community becomes the most important thing for a festival to do right now.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I wonder, of course, have to take a much deeper dive to know the answer to this, but I wonder, so, if you mentioned someplace like Montgomery, where they're only doing 1 a year, if that's what they found their audience could only support. And that the audience wanted, contemporary works, and they want the big musicals and that kind of a thing in order to maintain their audience and maintain their organization. If that's what they found, then I get it. You can only do art with a capital A for so long, because you have to continue to do art with a capital C for cash.
Exactly.
Or there's no art at all.
And when you have these large multi-million-dollar budgets, and you rely on that cash, you've got to do what the audience wants. And, there's that old adage that we all remember: the audience knows what it likes, and it likes what it knows.
Yes. And so that makes me, and that's a great point to what I wanted to ask you about, is I wonder how many of them started messing around with Shakespeare so much that they drove their audiences away. Because there seemed to be, over the last decade particularly, this sort of approach to Shakespeare as we must contemporize it. We must mess with it. We must play with it. It's no longer relevant. It's no longer appreciated. We have to monkey with it and make it more appealing. And I wonder if that hasn't backfired on multiple organizations who had spent so long developing an audience, a community, who knew what they wanted and wanted what they knew, and suddenly showed up and went, "This isn't Shakespeare. I don't know what this is."
I understand that sort of happened here in Ashland in the Oregon Festival. I don't know all the details behind it, but I know that there was a bit of an audience revolt into some of the transitions that were happening at the festival, and now they're starting to work back towards their roots, so to speak. I'm not a purist when it comes to Shakespeare. I've done my own adaptations. I've done my cutting. I'm not ashamed of that at all. I've also done very, very traditional productions. I was able to direct Dennis Krosnick, who is was one of the founders of Shakespeare and Company up in Massachusetts, in King Lear. Matter of fact, in his last performance of King Lear before he passed away a few years ago, and that was done very, very traditionally. In higher ed, I've done both ways. I've come to realize that students have to have the traditional experience as well as to be able to see how universal Shakespeare is through adaptation. So I can tell you that I once did a production of, I've done Love's Labor's Lost 4 times now in my career. And one of the times I did
Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's a tough one.
Actually, it's one of my favorite shows because it works great.
I had a Shakespeare festival in Redlands, California, early in my Shakespeare career, and we did it once, and I was like, okay, that's the end of that. We're good with that. We're good for that one for a while now.
But it's a great one for young people because you got 4 guys and 4 girls, and it's a fun game. It's a fun runaround. But I did it as a jukebox musical because I had some very, very young actors. I didn't have the time to teach them the full use of the text. And so I started cutting the play and realized that the four young men were just like the Beatles. And so we put it into a 1960s pop musical environment. I got royalties for most of the Beatles songs, and we did it a la karaoke style. Baroon gets to sing of his love.
So that reminds me of the Branagh film version, right? But that was set, I think, 30s.
Yeah, right after World War I. Going into World War II. Yeah.
Maybe late 20s or early 30s type of a flair to it. And that movie is very entertaining and fun and really put a spin on it that I think works.
But Branagh has also done A Winter's Tale that's very, very traditional. We all know the film Henry V that he did, which is almost historical.
That was his thrust to stardom.
I saw Branagh do King Lear in New York City 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
He played Lear or he directed?
He did both. Played Lear and directed. And it was
he's a psycho.
It was a really tight production too. So there's a audience for both types of productions. And I think knowing your audience and also knowing what you're trying to do. I was trying to train young actors. And so understanding that you have to have a traditional experience and know how it's supposed to have been set originally on stage, and then your ability to use your imagination and creativity and conceptualize something that still has validity. It's still based on the text. The storyline is still resonating to the audience, but you're finding another way of telling that story. And you and I chatted about this, that we're storytellers, that we want to find the way to get to our audiences. And that's why I'm not a purist in any way, shape, or form. I'm not afraid to cut Shakespeare, because if the audience doesn't understand it and I can't get the actor to communicate that understanding, I've got to find some way of getting the audience to that story.
Well, and a modern audience only has such an attention span today too. It's not like back in 1580s and 1590s when there was nothing else to do and you could sit through 4 hours of a play and have performers, bear baiting and jugglers come in between the acts of the play, right? Like it's a different animal, it's a different game. Sure, I totally get that.
And we've also become visually stimulated versus orally stimulated.
Yes.
And so
no one says I'm going to go hear a play.
Yeah.
Like they did in the 16th century.
And spectacle becomes very, very important.
Indeed. I've done quite a few Greek tragedies in my lifetime too. And, the Greek tragedies are famous for the violence all happening off stage. You can't do it that way anymore. They want the blood and guts. They want to see, like, horror films corrupted us, and now we want to see Oedipus gouge his eyes out right in front of us, not somebody talk about it and then he comes out with a bandage on his head. Like, that just doesn't work anymore.
Speaking of King Lear, right? Gloucester's eyes.
Yep.
The grapes roll on the stage.
Yep. Yeah, indeed. Where I think where the actual term eyeball first was coined was in that play.
I believe you're right.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you about Lear in a second, but I wanted to say that I would argue, and I'm curious to see what you think, I would argue that there's a great difference between Shakespeare adaptations and conceptualized productions of Shakespeare. And I'm not a purist either. And I believe in conceptualizing productions of Shakespeare if the time and place that you're choosing is consistent and it works for the text. But I have concerns about people who adapt Shakespeare and whether or not it actually still remains Shakespeare once they have done what they've done to it. And I think there's a broad difference there.
Oh, yeah. I fully agree with you. And you can say it's influenced by, original story by or original concept by. But, a lot of the film adaptations that are being done, the production of Romeo and Juliet that was done with who's the kid? He's not a kid anymore. Oh, you'll cut this.
No, I won't. I'm not sure which one you're talking about.
The one where it was done in a very modern environment instead. And
you're talking about the DiCaprio version?
Yeah,
right? Sure.
That version of Romeo and Juliet.
Baz Luhrmann version
is not Romeo and Juliet. It is a very much a modern adaptation of it. But it conceptualized it to a point to speak to a very specific audience.
I think DiCaprio is like 50 now. Actually.
Yeah, exactly. He's a young man to me still.
Actually, my wife and I we did a special bonus episode about comparing Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet to Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet. And there's some, interesting similarities, and then of course a lot of very different stuff. I had a guest earlier this last season who just made a new film adaptation of Romeo and Juliet, and it ended with a happy ending, which is something that David Garrick was doing back in the 18th century. And so is that truly Shakespeare? And I think no. I think you're right. I think what you can say is, based on the work by William Shakespeare, as opposed to Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet,
which is what Shakespeare did himself, right?
Sure.
He took extant stories and adapted them, made them better, strengthened them himself.
Yeah, I could see a Shakespeare text that says, based on Bandello's version of, based on the Italian novella. No, they didn't do that, did they? So back to Lear. I haven't done a Lear. I look forward to doing a Lear, and I don't mean playing Lear. I mean directing a Lear. Of course, Lear's like Hamlet. You don't choose to do that show if you don't have the actor already lined up to play that role. It's just not a good idea. Finding a Lear is a lot harder than finding a Hamlet, because you need to have an age-appropriate male who can, 4 scores. He's got to be believable to be 80 years old. Well, most 80-year-olds I know will never memorize those lines. Sorry, it's true. I've dealt with actors from ages 6 to 80. And the older you get, the harder it gets. Even for me, in the middle of that range, well, a little further beyond the middle of that range. But, even I start to struggle. So that's one of the great challenges. I tell people who say they'd like to play Lear someday, I say, start memorizing now.
Exactly.
So you'll be ready
by
the time you're old enough. But I have this concept. And again, so here, concept as opposed to adaptation. And I've done the research on this, and there's maybe 2 lines that you would have to change or omit in order for this concept to work. That Lear's fool is actually his imaginary friend and doesn't really exist. That he is having a schizophrenia breakdown mental aspect. And everyone around him is aware of this. And they realize he's talking to himself, which is all part of why they treat him the way they treat him. He's really lost his mind. He's really off in dementia. Only one character actually speaks directly to the fool, and it's Kent, which makes sense that Kent would indulge Lear and pretend like he does acknowledge that the fool is real for his king and his sovereign, right? And then one of the daughters says something about the fool, but you could probably make it work because it's disparaging anyway, right? And then the fool disappears.
Oh yeah, he died. He
literally
just
just
hung.
Disappears. Some versions have like seeing him being murdered, but that's not actually in the text.
No, actually, it says the fool's been hung.
Yeah.
Lear says that.
Yes.
Yeah, poor fool's been hung.
Yeah, he decides to get rid of this secondary character, this imaginary friend, because he doesn't need him anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, after the storm, when he comes back to lucidity and he's like practically normal again, right? So I don't know. What do you think of that?
I actually think that's a very interesting concept to explore and get into the text with. Again, it's been 5 years, it's been 9 years, 10 years since I directed the production. So I'd have to get into the text to look at all those references. The key thing for me with the fool goes back to actually the fool's lines where he says, you might think I'm a fool, but I'm actually the wise one here. Listen to what I'm saying. And so that resonates as an alter ego.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
The most difficult thing about that is suddenly the line load just that actor now has to learn that many more lines and then be able to play it off like Jekyll Hyde type of a thing, right?
Yeah.
Where and literally, turn his head this way and speak in fool voice, and then turn his head this way and speak in Lear voice, and have a conversation with himself on stage. But wouldn't that also be just so unsettling for the audience?
You could also do it as Lear's voice and just let him hear it himself and respond
and pre-record.
Yeah.
I thought about that, and that's how you could do it in a film version and make it a lot easier too, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, I wondered what you thought of that idea.
No, the hard part for us, because again, Dennis had done this role several times, so he knew the role, he knew Lear, and brought a lot of that knowledge into the production with it. But during the storm scene, we were trying to find a way to make sure that this wonderful aging actor didn't have to throw out his vocal cords and scream in the center of the storm, especially with the violence of the storm. And so we came up with the idea of splitting a lightning bolt, like a moment of time. And so Lear would scream, blow wind, crack hurricanes, right? And then when the more lucid moments had to happen, we just lit the entire theater with full light back at the audience. So we were in the middle of a lightning bolt and no sound except for Lear talking. And then boom, back into the storm.
I like that. That's great stage convention.
And
that's
it just
brilliant.
allowed us to really communicate the words of Shakespeare through Lear in a way that he just didn't have to rip out his vocal cords to happen and scream over the top of the storm. And it also then all of a sudden gave great clarity to the moment, because we could see the moment and understand what's going on in his head more.
I like that from a convention standpoint, even though you came upon it from a practical standpoint, because I think you're right. I think that really enhances the storytelling, doesn't it? No, that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah. Well,
I'm going to steal that someday.
You can. Remember that plagiarism is stealing one person's work. Research is stealing two.
Yes. And I'll use Shakespeare as my excuse. Yeah. Like he taught me how to steal everything.
Exactly. But that idea of practical solutions to problems on stage is exactly why we have 3 murderers in the Scottish tragedy, because there's only 2 murderers that ever come up and talk to Macbeth about killing Banquo, right? But there's 3 that show up at the murder site. Well, that's because it takes 2 people to pick up a body and carry him off stage, and somebody else to pick up the weapons. It's a practical theatrical reason.
And then, there's a lot of people who make the witches be the murderers,
That's
right? That's a common layer that a lot of people put into their production.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, when you contact some of these organizations and you let them know what it is you're doing, do you find that on the whole, most of them have been very accommodating and willing to talk to you, or have you sort of had a mixed bag? What's been the reaction, the response?
Sorry, a mixed bag. And the larger the institution it is, the harder it is sometimes to get into them. The Old Globe in San Diego, I was trying to get in to see Barry Edelstein. And
that's tough. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, it's Edelstein.
And not only that, but it's a huge institution, and the artistic director's time is eaten. I was able to have friends that knew the folks at Ashland Shakespeare, and so for me to get in to see Tim Bond was asking somebody else to open the door.
Sure.
And so that worked wonderfully.
It's not what you know, but who you know, right?
Sometimes,
yeah.
But for the most part, everybody's been very excited to come talk to me. Actors, audience members. Some of the early places I set up a booth, like at the Kentucky Shakespeare Festival. I set up my banner outside and interviewed audience members. And there was one person there in the audience when I said, "What excites you about Shakespeare?" They said, "Well, we've been traveling the country seeing the whole canon, and seeing Cymbeline is the last show on our list. So we've come all the way from wherever they were to come see this production in Kentucky." And so you get to hear marvelous stories from all sorts of folks about why Shakespeare is important to them.
I haven't even seen the whole canon. Cymbeline's one of the ones I haven't seen. So there you go.
I've got my checklist and I'm working through it.
Yeah. I mean, there's only a few I haven't seen. That's definitely one of them.
Yeah. But that's part of the goal of this trip is
I saw Henry VIII in London.
So did I.
At the London Globe.
Same here.
2 years ago, maybe.
Oh, no, mine was more like 15 to 20 years ago.
Oh, no, this was just a couple of years ago, and I left at intermission. It was so bad.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it was so terrible.
That was my first Scottish tragedy by the RSC. It was bad. I walked out, too.
Yeah.
But I also had jet lag after flying.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No, it was not a concept. It was an adaptation. and it was a terrible adaptation, including they were throwing in lines from other plays. And I'm like, okay, if the play is so bad that you have to take the one-liners from other plays, then just don't do it. Like, just leave it alone. That's crazy.
Understand.
Yeah. So the next thing I want to ask you about then is, what do you have a timeline on this? Like, what is your, do you have like a deadline, a goal? You're going to do this in the next year? You're going to do it in the next 2 years? Or is it just open-ended and however it plays, it plays?
When the original idea came out, I was going to be on a 1-year sabbatical. And so when we started thinking about this version of it, right, the retirement version, we're going, oh, we could do 2 years. And I'm going, no, this is probably going to be a 3-year gig at least. Right now, we're planning to hit Alaska in 2028. And then fly to Hawaii, sort of to cap everything.
You're not taking your RV to Hawaii?
No, I wish it doesn't float that well.
I'm disappointed.
But the biggest challenge has not been finding the theater companies. The biggest challenge has been finding the schedule. So for me to go to Hawaii, I have to go in July, August, when the theater's having their show on the board, right? Because it's a summer festival for them. Same thing is true for some of the productions in Alaska. I found a production of Winter's Tale at the Idaho Shakespeare Festival, and we scheduled the weekend to get down to it so I could see a show in Idaho. Then I found 2 shows in Montana that were playing in rep in public parks. So one would be in one park one night and a different show would be in a different park. And so making that schedule has been the hardest part, because if, I can't see a show in Atlanta this weekend, right? I'm now in Oregon. And so how do you find the shows and get there? So speaking of the Alabama Shakespeare Festival in Montgomery, right? If they're only doing 1 Shakespeare show a year now.
I think it's Much Ado About Nothing this year.
But how do I get there when that show's on the board? And that's the scheduling, the logistic problem that I have.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then do you have, like, you said you made a database of the different companies.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you mentioned A Noise Within. They're definitely not a specific Shakespeare company. They're a classical theater company primarily.
Correct.
Or so they used to be anyway. I don't know. They do a lot more modern stuff now, I think. But so it's not specific Shakespeare companies or Shakespeare festivals only.
No, I saw a production of Measure for Measure at the at a small art conservatory college in Santa Maria, California. And we just happened to be spending the night in Santa Maria. And I looked on my Facebook post and it popped up. And so I ran over and grabbed tickets for this production of Measure for Measure and saw it. It was a all-woman cast doing it. Marvelous little production. So I stumble upon things as I'm traveling too. And I've found out that social media is probably the greatest tool I have for finding out what's happening local as I move into an area. And I have been actually using AI as well. I plug into AI and say, I'm going to be traveling through the area, from this time to this time. What can you find for me? What's Shakespeare related? And so our whole trip through California was partially organized through AI because we wanted to make sure we hit all the national parks at the same time, and we didn't want to get stuck someplace in snow. So how do you make a trip through California to get to all the national parks and miss the weather events that you want to miss?
Well, also trying to see as many Shakespeare plays as possible up and down the state.
Yeah.
Now, how about so let me throw some at you and find out if they're on your list. Is Tahoe on your list?
Yes, it is. But again, I can't get to Tahoe at the time they have the show on the boards because I'm someplace else. So I'm going to be coming back around. And that's why the
Shakespeare Tavern in Atlanta.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And I actually know folks there.
Jeff's a great guy out there.
Yeah.
He's been a guest on the program, and their very first practices over there.
There's a production of Julius Caesar that we know is going to be happening at the Orlando Shakespeare Festival, and we're planning to winter down in Florida this year. We were in Tucson last year and for winter, and it just so happened there was a touring production of Anne Juliet, and so we were able to see that while we were in Tucson, but we were at the Albuquerque Balloon Festival, and they were doing Coriolanus. So it just works out. So there's more.
You mentioned Shakespeare and Company up in Massachusetts.
Yep.
And then there's also the one in the eastern part of New York on the river.
Oh, I know
Hudson?
on the Hudson. Yeah, and
Yeah.
they just got a brand new theater. It looks gorgeous.
Yeah,
so I'm
yeah.
looking forward to being
I've
there.
always wanted to go there
Yeah.
because they have such a beautiful setting.
Yeah. And then, Joe's Pap's Place in New York City,
Sure.
Shakespeare in the Park was shut down for 2 years.
Cleveland, there's one in Cleveland, isn't there?
Yep. And of course, the Folger in Washington, D.C.,
Sure.
the Shakespeare Theater. I remember interviewing Michael
There's one
Kahn.
in Nevada too. There's one just outside of Las Vegas, I think, that's pretty popular.
And then there's also the Utah Shakespeare Festival. And we've been there before. We're not going to hit it on this leg, but there's Bard on the Beach up in Vancouver, so just over the border. And then the Stratford Festival, of course, up in
Well, and you
Ontario.
already did California, but you didn't do Shakespeare by the Sea.
No, they didn't have anything on the boards as we were coming through.
Because there's summer only.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's the biggest logistical challenge I have, is being in the right place at the right time. And so my goal is to hit at least one Shakespeare festival or one Shakespeare production in every state. And so far I've been able to do that.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, so did AI help you find us? How'd you find us?
Actually, it was coming through the area, going through an art museum and picking up a postcard.
See,
So old-fashioned
there
advertising and
you go.
marketing.
Marketing works, ladies and gentlemen. The Rogue Valley Shakespeare Company knows what they're doing. Well, that's awesome. I'm so glad that you could find us that way and that we could be a part of your series and that you could be here to be a part of this as
And
well.
it's been
Because
wonderful.
I'm certain my listeners are some of my listeners are probably going to model their retirement after you and what you're doing, because I know many of them love these works so much. And I think a lot of us have the goal of wanting to see the entire canon.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of us have the goal of wanting to see every state. And a lot of us have a goal of wanting to see all the national parks. So you got the perfect trio going on there.
And meeting great people, having a wonderful time, and just enjoying retirement, which is really what we want to do. We didn't want to sit down and just grow old and sit in one spot. We wanted to be very active in our retirement.
What's the most difficult part about living in an RV? I've only known a few people who've ever attempted to do that, and I've always thought, I don't know if I could ever do that or not.
Because of the size of our rig, it's a small home. And so we actually lived in North Carolina before we retired. We lived in a 780 square foot log cabin with a couple of outbuildings. So my wife's jewelry studio was in an outbuilding. I had a barn that I kept my tractor in and my workshop and everything in, right? But we lived in 780 square feet. So moving into the RV, we only had to cut that down by half. We've done a lot of remodels inside the rig so that the space becomes very, very usable. My wife's got a small jewelry studio that she makes her jewelry in while I travel. I've used the front dashboard, has a desk that pops out, and that becomes my editing station. So while we're traveling, and we've just made everything so it can be compacted and put away. We have a lot of our stuff in the basement. I put in book racks, so I've got my Arden editions of every Shakespeare play that I can pull out as my reference as I travel. So,
and you tow a vehicle behind?
We tow a Jeep behind as well. So the RV is our moving home, but we're not stuck everywhere we travel.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
We just bought a travel trailer this last year, and we were enjoying it tremendously. Mm-hmm. But I love the fact that I can park it, disconnect, and then just go wherever. And I think, well, a motorhome, it's a lot harder to do that unless you're pulling a vehicle behind. Yep. So
and we also have 2 electric bikes. So when we take the bikes out.
And look at you!
Yeah. So we're traveling around the country.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And does your wife sell her jewelry on the side?
She does. She does. She's got her own Etsy site and her online website. And we just stopped in a gallery in Grants Pass. And they were interested in maybe putting some of her work up there too.
Well, that's great. Yeah. And does she do any Shakespeare themed pieces?
No, she's got her own aesthetic. She leaves Shakespeare to me.
Oh, okay. Well, you had to know, George, that I wasn't going to let you come sit in the chair and not ask you a couple questions about what all my listeners are wondering. Is he going to ask him? Is he going to ask him? And that is, what do you know? What do you think? Do you care about the Shakespeare authorship mystery?
I'll be really honest. I don't care.
Okay.
And it's because, yes, there's a history. There is a mystery, as you put it, as to who wrote the plays. But as a theater artist working in the 21st century, what I'm looking at are the text. I'm looking at the words. I'm looking at the stories. And they're so universal. They transcend and share the human experience in such a rich way that to me, it doesn't matter as much who wrote them, because I'm not I'm not Stratford in UK, right? I'm not making millions and millions of dollars from the tourist dollars that are coming into the area. I know that there was somebody who was a genius that wrote these, and I understand that most of them were written in a collaborative form. I know that they were old ideas and old stories that were renovated and rewritten and polished, and I know that a group of actors came together to bring them to life and put their input into how it all came together. What resonates most importantly for me is that the works are existing today, and we get to play with them. We get to share those stories and keep those universalities, those universal ideas alive today.
Do you think it's possible that the writer could have been someone who never performed a role ever, was just a writer? Or do you think that they speak actor language?
Well, I don't know that August Wilson ever got on stage and acted in his own plays.
Okay.
I don't know that Arthur Miller was ever a great actor on stage. But I know that they were great writers. So I don't necessarily think that it's a prerequisite to, I don't think it's a prerequisite to be an actor to be able to write those great plays. I also don't think that you have to have the full life experience to understand a moment and be able to write it, because I believe in imagination and creativity. And so while I've never been in space, I could probably do enough research to understand what that experience is like. I could listen to other interviews. I could talk to astronauts face to face and write about an experience about being in space without ever having done it.
But we have access to research of the whole world at our fingertips. And in the 1580s, having access to just say the concepts of Giordano Bruno was not as easy, and only certain circles would have had any access to him and what his theories were and how he was changing our belief system when it came to the universe. So I don't know that that's quite relevant in that sense. Then, so a guy from Stratford, could he have had access to the texts that these plays are built on? Would he have had extant Italian versions of novellas to then read and be able to steal from, for instance? So I don't know if that really, if we can really equate how hard it would have been to do research then as it is for us today, so easy.
Different concept, but yes, I understand the point that you're making. Having access to information and having access to experiences, but I still don't think that underlies my belief that creativity and imagination can understand things. You can be sensitive and understand moments in time. You can be sensitive and understand moments in history, and you can understand the human condition. Most of the playwrights that we think about relative to Shakespeare were male. And you and I already had the conversation that some of the greatest female roles were written in the Shakespearean plays.
Mm-hmm.
And so how did they write those? Right? We could make the same argument about understanding a cultural or a societal moment as well as a gender moment.
I would argue the writer had to have been exposed to some really outstanding women in his life in order to have created the characters that we see on the page.
I agree with you.
So then you mentioned August Wilson. So let me ask you this question. Here's a zinger for you. Ready? So August Wilson, do we appreciate Fences better knowing the life story of August Wilson, or would we still appreciate Fences if Fences had been written by an anonymous writer?
I appreciate Fences because of the human story of father and son and the complexities that the time put on that family.
Does it matter that the writer was black or not?
Oh, I think it matters that the writer was black in that it is a black story that is being told. It's the story of an African-American experience that I wouldn't fully understand myself because I haven't lived that experience, but I can understand the experience more because of August Wilson's work. And so therefore, there's the humanness of the story can be brought to me because I was able to access that experience through another play or another person or somebody sharing that experience with me.
Do we find, do you think, inside Death of a Salesman, any evidence of the life of Arthur Miller?
Oh, I'm sure we do.
Or would it matter?
I don't necessarily know that the life of the author is as important. I mean, you can say the same thing about Tennessee Williams, right?
Oh God, that's a big one.
Yeah,
That's huge.
right.
Like he is, and he is
Exactly.
all of his female characters.
Exactly. But do we have to know Tennessee Williams to know the character, or do we experience the character through the theatrical experience? And therefore, we've learned something about that person. But does it matter that we learn something about that person? I know people who have gone to a play and don't know anything about William Shakespeare. I know people who have gone to a play who don't even know who August Wilson is. I know that the people who have gone to a Tennessee Williams production or Eugene O'Neill production, they don't know anything about the author other than some person wrote a play,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so,
what about the actors in preparation for the roles?
well, I'm a big one for research, right?
Yeah.
So the more we know about everything, the more choices we can make.
Okay.
And so I think, yes, that becomes very important, but that's for a different reason.
Sure. I agree. I
Right.
agree. And I believe the audience
Yeah.
can enjoy
Yeah.
the performance, but
Yeah.
I believe the audience will enjoy the performance more
Yeah.
if the actor has done their homework and is understanding where this character is coming from and the motivations of the writer who wrote it.
Mhm.
Right. And so along this lines, I would say in the Shakespeare canon, you have a tremendous number of aristocratic characters, which I say argues that only an aristocrat could have written those characters, just as I would argue that only a black man could have written Fences. You see what I'm getting at?
I see the point that you're getting at, but I could also see that in terms of understanding nobility, if you're around it enough and you're disassociated from it because you're not in it, you can also observe a lot of things and understand how it works.
So the writer would have had to have been exposed to the aristocracy on a regular basis,
I don't know on a regular basis. Again,
but
creativity
enough
and imagination.
to have
Yeah,
that sort of an imprint
yeah,
upon them.
yeah.
Oh, I'm just curious about. There are a lot of artists that I talk to about this who say, "What does it matter? The works are beautiful. The works are great. They stand alone. Who cares who wrote them?"
Mhm.
And for the reasons that I just said, I think there are reasons to want to know. I think the inquiry is
Oh, yeah.
real from an artist's perspective. Then, of course, there's the layer of, as an artist, you want credit to be given where it belongs, and the idea that if we've been wrong all these centuries about who the true artist is, well, then that's a terrible tragedy in itself, isn't it?
To a certain extent, we're discovering more and more every day. We just found out that Shakespeare's place in Blackfriars, they just pulled up the records and found the legal documents that actually pinpointed to where they thought it was going to be, just down the street from Blackfriars, right? So we're finding more and more every day, and I'm sure that evidence will come out if one way, shape, or another. But at this point in time, the ambiguity is creating a lot more questions than giving us the answers. And we can enjoy that mystery. But the reality is, as a director, I've got a text, I've got page of text that I'm working on with an actor, and I'm trying to find a way to bring it to life for an audience that is going to come and see it in the 21st century. And I don't know that the authorship issue is that relevant to the live performance that I'm working on today with an actor and that text.
Probably to the audience, inherently no. Right? To the actor, if they're interested in knowing the backstory behind the text, then yes.
Yeah.
Especially some of the very obscure jokes that we find in the Shakespeare canon that are specifically directed at various members of the Elizabethan court. I would argue right now in the middle of rehearsals for Twelfth Night that the actor who plays Malvolio, if he doesn't understand that Christopher Hatton is being lampooned the way that he is, that it's harder for him to personify that character. If the actress playing Olivia doesn't realize that in many ways that character is a depiction of the queen. She's lost her father. She's lost her brother. She's going to mourn and admit no men to her. And here you have Viola saying, you do the world an injustice if you don't create a copy. So there's a direct message to the queen saying you need to have an heir in that play. And I think it's important for the actors to see that and know that. The question then I have is once you get to there and they go, well, would this guy from Stratford be allowed to say to the queen, you need to choose a husband and have a baby and not be like murdered
Beheaded.
for it? The answer is no, he would not. He would absolutely not be allowed to say that. So then who is it? Who did it? Well, there you go. That's the mystery, right? So I think that's the layer as an artist that I find with my actors. There's sometimes, though, I'll say to the actors something to the degree of, you know, for instance, we mentioned when we were filming your episode, I mentioned the fart jokes in Twelfth Night and how the Earl of Oxford was, you know, cast out from court because he farted before the queen. And there they show up. And when I mentioned that to the actors in rehearsal, they're like, yeah, that's interesting. Moving on. I think, you know, sometimes they could care less. They're like, oh yeah, Sable and his Oxford stuff.
You know, but as good as a fart joke is, don't you think that half of London knew about that too?
Oh, well, yeah. And, you know, and Oxford's enemies made sure everyone knew about it.
Exactly.
Right? Because it was a terribly embarrassing moment. And he literally was, you know,
kicked out of court,
exiled from court for a period of time, you know, for, as Festi says, venting his folly. Yes. So anyway, I think, you know, I agree with you in the sense that if you don't approach it, it's not required. But I find that once you open that door, the enrichment value becomes intensified throughout the process.
Exactly. But going back to that 120 hours that we have with the actors and the text on the stage to get it ready for an audience, how much time do we spend on that portion of the show that doesn't necessarily illuminate the story or help to greatly illuminate the character? It might add a level to it. Whereas what I really want to do is spend time in the moment-to-moment action with the actor to understand the text, the meaning of the text, understand where the text might have come from, yes. But what I'm trying to do is get to the poignancy of the moment for the audience's sake. And I don't know that debate becomes, there goes our clock.
The clock invites me.
That's right.
It is time.
I don't know that mystery, while very exciting to explore, is what I want to spend my rehearsal time in with an actor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, I have practically converted my entire company. So just so you know.
That's quite all right.
Yeah, I am changing the world one skeptic at a time. And
that's a good goal to have.
Yeah, though we haven't pulled you to the dark side in this episode, I think you are flirting with the edge, sir. So just say it.
I'm always open to everything. So yeah, like I said, there's so much ambiguity, there's so much lack of what we know that there's wonderful possibilities.
Tell the listeners how they can find you.
I'm at travelswithwillie.com, and that's Willie spelled Willie. Travelswithwillie.com.
There you go. Not with a Y, but with an IE.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Willie's being slang for poets back in the early Renaissance.
Exactly. And William.
Of course. But I think it's poets.
Okay.
That's where I think the name William Shakespeare came from. William. I am a Willie. I am a poet. That's my thought on it anyway. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Stephen.
And thank you for finding us here in the Rogue Valley, and look forward to seeing you at one or more of our performances this season. And I hope you enjoyed this more than you enjoy Tim Bond over at OSF.
I'm sure I will. Thank you.
Well, there you have it, fellow Quillers. He is George Brown, travelswithwillie.com. Enjoy some of the YouTube videos he already has posted there where he interviews folks from around the country who are as enthralled with these works as we are. The one thing I can say, Stratfordian, Oxfordian, Marlovian, Elizabethan, whatever you are, the one thing we all share in common that we should cleave to, that we should try to embrace on all levels, is our mutual love for this canon.
Amen.
Don't forget, you can follow George's adventures at travelswithwillie.com, travelswithwillie.com. And at some point, when George has caught up on his editing, you will find a YouTube video of him interviewing yours truly about my own Shakespeare company. And George will be in his travels, returning back here through Southern Oregon to see one of our performances this year. So we're pleased to be a part of Travels with Willie. Though I don't think we converted George into a bona fide skeptic, I think we at least have him asking some questions. And that's the way it begins, isn't it, fellow Quillers? And speaking about how it begins, man, it is hard to believe we began this journey more than 7 years and 185 episodes ago. Those of you who have been here from the beginning, we can't thank you enough for being loyal Quillers all of this time. And those of you who have joined the Quiller Nation over the years, we can't say enough how glad we are to have you among the fold. I want to encourage all of you to share the Quiller Nation with others. My favorite way to do so is really simple. I send a link to a favorite episode to someone I think who might enjoy that episode. With so many episodes in the library now, it's easy to choose an episode that you believe will appeal to the interests of a friend or family member with just a little note that says, hey, I follow this interesting podcast and I thought you'd appreciate this episode. It's the same as sharing a meme through social media. Hey, isn't this funny? Hey, isn't this interesting? Hey, I saw this stat. I saw this fact. Hey, here's a silly cartoon. Instead, it's, hey, here's this episode of this podcast I follow that I thought you might enjoy. History buffs, theater goers, film enthusiasts, world travelers, literature fans, lawyers, doctors. We now have episodes for practically everyone. Do you know someone who's planning a trip? Maybe they're going to travel to Greece or Italy. We have episodes they might like. Do you know a doctor or a lawyer? Maybe your own doctor. We have lots of those episodes. Know somebody who loves reading? Think about the number of authors we have covered, from historical fiction to mystery to fantasy fiction to historical research. We've had so many different authors on the show over the last 7.5 seasons. Film buffs would love episodes featuring filmmakers, actors, and even one of my favorites, when we had screenwriter John Orloff. Remember that incredible episode? Maybe you know somebody who loved Band of Brothers, and so they know Orloff's work, and they might be interested in hearing about what he had to say about what he does as a screenwriter, and that opens the door for them to the Quiller Nation. My challenge to you, fellow Quillers, is to choose just one person, or more if you're so inspired, but at least one person you know. Curate a specific episode for that person and send them the link. This is a simple way to introduce the authorship mystery to others without becoming what our friend Dr. Earl Schoerman calls an Obnoxfordian, which is a name he says members of his family have given him over the years. And so I love that term. I steal it and I use it every once in a while. So you don't have to be an Obnoxfordian. You can simply be a mystery sharer and share this mystery with others, one episode at a time. Just a subtle suggestion to someone to listen to an episode that may appeal to them can start their journey and help us grow the Quiller Nation one member at a time. Consider it a grassroots effort to help shift the paradigm in favor of healthy inquiry into this great literary mystery. Take the challenge. Come on, fellow Quillers, I know you can do it. Take the challenge. One person, one episode. And I'd love it if some of you would send me an email to let me know how it goes for you. Tell us. You don't have to name the person, obviously, but just tell us, yeah, I sent an episode about Shakespeare and the law to a lawyer friend of mine, and this is what happened. Or I sent an episode featuring an author about their book, and my friend decided to read the book, or whatever happens. So contact at don'tquillthepodcast.com. Contact at don'tquillthepodcast.com. Send us your Quiller Challenge stories. We would love to hear how they come about. We'd love to hear some Quiller tales and share them with others who might be further inspired to take the challenge. It has been disappointing that we had to cancel our planned event for Gray's Inn London in May, which was set to become an incredible outreach opportunity to reach new Quillers. But there are other ways to keep the movement growing while we regroup to create another outreach event for the future. Conferences and gatherings of fellow skeptics can be fun and enjoyable, but they do very little for expanding the movement. It's the same choir preaching to each other in a room, and that's not growing anything. And as I have lately had to acknowledge my own mortality, and we look around at the aging class of authorship skeptics and researchers, some of whom will no longer even travel to a conference anymore, but would rather Zoom in from their living rooms, we must do something revolutionary to bring this mystery to a new and expanding audience. That's what the Gray's Inn event was supposed to be, and that's what a new event will be in the future. But in the meantime, let's not sit on our hands. Let's get active. One member at a time. Take the Quiller Challenge. I believe in you. I know you can do it. Life is short. There's no time like the present. Seize the day and help others to embrace the idea that we should keep asking questions.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave a rating and review in your podcast player. For even more, visit our website, don'tquillthepodcast.com. There you can find official merchandise in our shop, as well as a link to our Patreon. This show is made possible by people like you. We hope you'll consider showing your support by becoming a monthly patron, where you'll receive bonus material and tons of exclusive perks. You can also join in the conversation on our Discord and by following us at Don't Quill the Pod on all social media. All of this can be found at don'tquillthepodcast.com, don'tquillthepodcast.com.
Dragon Wagon.